How do I even sleep at night anymore? Man. Well, simply put, I can't necessarily be sure on how to contextually identify my own words anymore. It almost feels like I'm simply losing myself completely. No trace of my own existence could ever solemnly detect any kind of viable life. And I probably suppose that just goes without saying that maybe someday we're probably expecting a lot more to happen, but just looking at what's happened so far, I mean, 11 months, 20 days, right here, when there's only a month and 2 weeks to go before the start of a whole new year. And yet this is a time where I feel like a lot of people are now just starting to come to their senses, but I feel like that's just not the point. Some people are finally agreeing with me, and I'm more than hopeful for that. But yet, to really confirm about the outlook on how this should be for a year like this, if you could even call it a year, I am just simply going to put it in a few distinct codex of words. This has been the worst year ever. There is zero doubt about that. And I see zero reason at all to suggest otherwise. All these people out here still have the decency to go out and claim 2020 is the worst, when it is not even close to being true at all to begin with whatsoever. And I almost feel like that with every statement video that I put up on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, anywhere in general, it almost feels like every single video out there is just a small hint of clickbait. That's just one of thousands of things out there that I'm sick of seeing on YouTube or elsewhere, because I have never once tried to do something like this. I am not Kid Behind the Camera. I am not McJuggernuggets. I am not Logan Paul. I am not KSI. I am not Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, SS Sniper Wolf, Vanos Gaming, or Underworld, or others of any sorts. I am not like any of them. I seem to be one of only very few people these days that gets up only to make these kind of videos, only to discuss the truth and the facts surrounding each and every piece of life that's currently wreaking havoc. With a pandemic that has evolved to multiply the amount of viruses that have circulated the globe thousands of times over, taking millions of lives with them, and destroying millions more. It should be no surprise that compared to the kind of viral outlook that we saw in 2020, 2021 should have just started and ended with lockdowns, because maybe then people would have all gone up and said, hey, this year actually is just like what we said at the end of 2020, where 2021 was going to be better. And then, well, guess what? It was the complete opposite of that right from the get-go. Because starting January 1st, the first entire week alone brought up a lot of horrible things. With some of the highest concentrations of viral activity, death tolls, cases, and otherwise, it should never be a single hint of a surprise that this is certainly the worst year in our lives. I mean, does anybody out there seem to get the hint? Is there a skull that's really too thick? Or is there something else that I feel like I need to touch up on? Well, either case, hopefully anybody out there has the decency to understand someone who is as honest as possible, like myself. And I guess on top of all that, when discussing a lot of things that have happened this year alone, not 2020, not 2019, which I'd say is debatably bad, but I'll probably talk a bit more about that in a little while, just so you can see what I'm trying to tell you. We're not talking about any other year, though, that's preceded this one. Just 2021, January 1st, 12 a.m., all the way to today, November 20th of 2021. End of story. Nada. Case closed. Because there is so much evidence that I've managed to collect. A massive list that I feel like I might as well talk about now even. But I'm honestly going to want to save this for a time where we're getting close to the end of the entire year and all that good stuff. And maybe then I'll start relaying out all the facts, every single hint of evidence that I've laid out pretty much in my mind and on various notepads where I can jot down my notes for ideas on future episodes and projects in general. So maybe this should be a good start to help you realize that this right here, the year 2021, is just not even going to stop wreaking havoc on our lives. It is beyond anything we've ever seen in our whole lives. The year 2017 was undeniably bad. Way bad compared to many other things. But when you really get down to it, I at least got through that year kind of easily, because there were a lot of highlights that I managed to get throughout that whole time, including various trips that I had, like my latest trip to the Walt Disney World and Universal Studios, and not to mention the latest family reunion related trip that we had, which took place in Colorado Springs in June 2017. And not to mention the massive bird flu case that I managed to catch up on. Man, was it awful at the time, but like I said, 2017, I really felt like that was the worst year of my life at the time, because so many other things other than a bird flu and plenty of other horrific things I've discovered on. And then, of course, there are the politics that pretty much were like the cherry on top of a puke smoothie, pretty much. But looking at the year 2021, however, it's beyond a puke smoothie with a cherry on top. It goes against everything that we've ever stood for. I could probably consider it to be like a cheeseburger, with the patty being congealed blood, with the buns being soft pieces of stool, and the various other toppings being some of the most disgusting things that we've ever seen in the history of the world. And then, of course, there's the smell that could be detected from miles away. And then, of course, there's the nasty side effect of potential delusion, confusion, and other things that happen. The kind of unbelievably smelly gases that are emitted from the stool and the various other things that are mixed together in that one burger. They practically alter your mind forever, leading you to a total hall of insanity. And you can never escape, not even with your highest of skills. Let's just say that this analogy is what more than just sums up how I feel about this entire year. Because at this point in time, I'm actually more than glad that people are also beginning to have agreements with me on this. Complete and total agreements with the truth. That's the one thing that I intend to stand for at a time like this. We might actually have ourselves a way to get out of this pandemic, but with all the other things that have taken place and a lot of other things that are just preventing us from reaching that goal in life, I just cannot even escape that grasp that this is the worst year of all time. There is no denying it. A lot of people would want to argue about this stuff, but I feel like the last thing that they're going to want to do is to just tell the truth about it all. Just simply look at everything that has ever happened. The first week of 2021 alone is what could probably send you packing to find a better life. Some of the highest concentrations of pandemic-related cases and deaths, plus the insurrection, plus celebrity deaths, and a lot of other interesting stuff. Groomer cases, affairs, and public documentations of thousands of other awful things. All in just the first week of 2021 alone. Meanwhile, the pandemic did start in October 2019, but yet it did not take until 5 months later to take action for it, when it should have been done to begin with. And that's just one of many things that I would dislike about the year 2019 alone. A pandemic started, but yet nobody took action at the time. And I'm more than grateful that, well, at least they did take action eventually, but not before a lot of people had died already. So, I'm just simply going to say this. 2020 was a good year. We had lockdowns. We had safety from the virus. But this whole entire year, when we've had some of the highest concentrations and highest ratios ever recorded in the history of pandemics in recent years, there has not been a single lockdown in the States. None. Not even 1 minute. That is just beyond dangerous and irresponsible. If you want to take care of a country, you gotta do it right. You have to keep people away from the public eye. You have to ensure that they keep locked tight in a building where a virus cannot simply just enter through, unless, of course, if it had itself the right evolution. If it were an airborne virus, that would be a whole different story with a whole different outcome. But the most important thing is to keep everybody separated. Because if there is in fact a case that develops where somebody catches a virus, then they are likely to spread it to other people and potentially kill them, or make them carriers of the virus next. So they could spread it to other people, and the cycle just repeats over and over and over again until everybody catches the virus and potentially dies from it. Nothing could be further from the truth on any of this stuff. It's almost like I'm being a bit more satirical on this than just serious. So, if you really want to have some sort of strange old debate on this sort of stuff, then well, you found the wrong place. Kaiju Force Neo is not at all going to be about debates. We are about taking action on these things. We are about keeping people safe at all costs. We are about continuing progress so technology can help us live better lives. And the year 2020 was the best possible time to ever put our technological advancements to good use. And nowadays, people just abandon it like it was nothing. Smart devices, streaming platforms, video chats, they all seem like they're now being just shoved to the side, abandoned, deserted, and never to be seen again. I will never forget any of this. I will never forget how such a year turned out to be way better than I ever could have anticipated, like 2020. And yet I'm also not going to forget a time like this, where apparently people do whatever they feel like and have no consequences to their actions. Hundreds of pedophiles are out there on the internet, constantly molesting children and not even getting punished for it at a criminal level. Millions of people of all sorts are legally allowed to do any of these kind of things that would definitely be considered illegal. They get away with it. In the year 2020, we kept a close eye on these different things. We know what these people are up to. And there have been so many times where people have actually gotten themselves caught. Rightfully so. And even convicted at times. But yet, that is not so right here. Sure, R. Kelly got sentenced to prison after all of these things related to minors. But man, what about everybody else? Like, seriously. At this point, I don't even know what to potentially put up with this. But at this point in time, I feel like that if I were to just simply go ahead and talk about many of the things that made this year beyond bad, in the history of the word bad being existent in the American language, I will go ahead and highlight a few things about this year that are just so bad that you will not trust me ever in the history of your life. So I'll just put out 10 highlights there in no particular order. Number 1, and the most obvious one of this year, the Capitol insurrection of January 2021. The second thing, extreme pandemic continuation, especially with what we already know about. The highest concentrations took place between January 16th and February 24th. Worldwide, where so many more people have died every day compared to many others that have happened even in 2020. Nowhere close to what we've had here in 2021. The third thing, the attempted comeback into presidency of Donald J. Trump. So, enough said. Anything political could be seriously bad for me in my career. I'll just leave it at that. Number 4, hashtag super straight. Man, like, why? Why create a sexuality that's not even a thing to begin with? What is wrong with y'all? Anyways, number 5, extreme vaccination drama. Very obvious. We're at a time where we can now get ourselves rightfully immune from all this stuff. So, I guess that's just pretty much what that is. As for the rest, well, there are pretty much a lot of different things out there. Things that seem to happen every single year. Various crimes, including a railway shootout, Palestinian warfare, and then of course there's all this talk thinking about how, well, Afghanistan related stuff pretty much took place. And not to mention various other things like celebrity deaths and company closures. This year alone, we've pretty much seen some of the highest possible cases of company-related closures. The pandemic was indeed responsible for plenty of different things out there, but believe it or not, even before the pandemic ever took place, and I'm speaking of pre-October 2019, business closures were everywhere. And I'm not just talking about Radio Shack, Blockbuster, and Toys R Us being big failures and eventually closing down for good. And then, of course, there was Chuck E. Cheese's, which was already pretty much way down in the well, unable to get out on its own. Its official closure took place all the way through by 2020. And so, that was pretty much guaranteed to happen anyway. So, even without a pandemic, Chuck E. Cheese's would have been doomed from the start. But let's just say, 2021 has had at least 20,000 closures across hundreds of different chains. A lot of places of all sorts, like Kohl's, Staples, and many other general retail stores of all sorts that have been well known over the past few generations, they seem to be meeting their end. But let's also not forget that many other companies out there, especially restaurant-based ones that I've known of for a while now, places like Ruby Tuesdays, Applebee's, Crystal, Five Guys, and even Papa John's Pizza, they are also likely to meet their own end, as many of them have already filed for bankruptcy in various chapters, especially between 4 and 11. But possibly the biggest thing out there relating to closures that I could not trust with my own eyes and ears would happen to be the closure of Shrek 4D in Universal Studios Orlando. And that is expected to happen by the end of this year. And then in January, we're going to be expecting that place to get ripped apart. So eventually, we'll be seeing a whole new place. But as devastating as that sounds, I don't even know where else to go with this. So you know what? I'll just leave it for another video some other time. But I still appreciate you guys with your support and all that good stuff in terms of how I make my content just for fun or just to have a little PSA every month or so.